introduce to all of you Dan Cupper. I think most of you have a program, so you can read his biography and so forth, and I'm not going to bore you with, I don't want to use the term bore. I mean, I don't want to use the time up that he has for his presentation. That's what I don't want to do. But I just want to make some just brief comments that Dan and I share some things in life, like we're both graduates of Penn State University. We share a very good mutual friend, and that was the reason I got Dan here, because of that mutual friend. I bought his book, and I have to put this in. It's Crossroads of Commerce that Dan published. What year was that?
1992.
1992. And he received an award, which is mentioned in his biographical sketch. But you might want to take a peek at this. And he also wrote a book of one of my previous employers, Penn National Insurance up in Harrisburg, which I found very interesting because Dan was a freelance writer. But the one thing Dan and I share more than anything else in life, I think, is the love of trains and railroads. Dan grew up in Lewistown. I grew up in Manheim, but I was fortunate enough to have my father grow up in Elizabethtown. And I spent many an hour up on that train platform in Elizabethtown, watching steam engines and GG1s and passenger trains go through Elizabethtown. So that's the one big thing we share. And I'm not going to take any more of your time, Dan, but one more thing. There's some train magazines out there, and Dan writes for trains. I'm not sure you were writing back in this period for trains or not. But if anybody wants any old trains magazines back from the early 90s into the middle 90s, you're more than welcome to take a peek at them and take them with you if you would like them. So, but anyways, I've said enough. So, all aboard for Dan Cupper. Let's give him a big round.
Technologically challenged.
Does that surprise you?
Can I help you here?
It seems to be frozen.
Uh-oh. Wow. Frozen. Yes.
Thanks so much for the warm welcome. I actually come to Elizabethtown pretty often because I have a son and grandson who live here over by the college. So today we're going to talk about railroading. We will first do a little review on railroading in Lancaster County, and then talk about my career as a conductor and engineer with Norfolk Southern. I had a later in life experience on the railroad. As Ken said, I grew up, my early years were in Lewistown, grew up in the Pittsburgh area, always around trains. Went into another career that was kind of related to the railroad, but not directly. And then about 2006, the bottom dropped out of that industry, and I had to find something else to do. And so right about then, the railroad was hiring. I was age 56, wow. And not a good time to be starting over. I was shocked when they hired me. So let's start talking about the railroading. I was on my way to Georgia, very old history as a conductor, so going back to the sitting right beside an 18-year-old. And of course, when we talk about railroad history in Lancaster County, what do we think of first? The Strasburg Railroad. Now, I have to ask, is there anybody here who has not ridden on the Strasburg Railroad?
Really?
Okay. Is that a hand?
Yeah, right here.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
We'll have to get you a field trip.
For a little catch-up session. Well, the Strasburg is well known for running steam locomotives, which is part of the heritage of railroading in America. And if you go there, you can ride in open cars, closed cars, dining cars, barred-up cars, whatever your choice is. Right across the street is the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania, and probably many have visited that as well. A fine collection of Pennsylvania railroad heritage. And of course, right next door to us here is the Harrisburg, Lincoln, and Lancaster Railroad on the Stone Gable Estates, the Star Barn Railroad, with its Lincoln funeral car. And of course, we don't have to look around very far to see a number of train stations in the county, starting with Elizabethtown. And of course, this station was abandoned about 1915 when the current station was built. And it's been nicely refurbished by Amtrak and local interests. One of the nicest ones in central Pennsylvania, and we'll look at some others in a little while. And of course, if you go to Philadelphia or Harrisburg, this is what you see up on the platform. Modern trains, high-level platforms, convenience, and of course, inside the trains, it looks like this. Very different from the open car on the Strasbourg. There's another option too, and that is from time to time there are private cars that are chartered, and they run on the tail end of Amtrak trains. And if you buy a ticket on one of those, you can find yourself in a fairly nice accommodation. This is a train that I took with my son and grandson 2 years ago. We went to Pittsburgh on the Pennsylvanian and got on here in Elizabethtown. Now, it's not only stations, but other landmarks. Not too far from here is the Mount Tunnel Cemetery, named, of course, for the tunnel that used to be just east of the Elizabethtown station. And other stations in the area, Mount Joy. Which looks like this now.
Amazing.
And of course, the 1929 Lancaster Station, which is now the second busiest in Pennsylvania after Philadelphia 30th Street. So those are some passenger railroad experiences that we talked about, but there's also freight railroading, and we have a number of short lines in Lancaster County. The Elizabethtown Industrial Railroad, right up here at Conewago. 1 mile of track, one customer, and one crew. And they switch cars of used motor oil in and out of the customer in the Conewago Industrial Park. And there it is with Amtrak coming by the junction at Conewago Junction. Then a little bit down the road is the Landisville Railroad. And of course we mentioned the Strasbourg, which nobody thinks of as being a freight carrier, but they do quite a business in freight, about 500 cars a year. Let's look at some landmarks, railroad landmarks in the county. Conewago Bridge, about 90 feet high. Safe Harbor Bridge, this is about 1949 or so. And of course that's been repurposed as a hiking and biking trail. So of course you can see lots of trains there. You can also see bald eagles from there. So a lot of people use the viewing stations there to look at the wildlife. And Shocksville Bridge, not far from Columbia. A lot of impressive railroad landmarks in the county. So now let's take a look at inside the trains. History from the locomotive cab, freight trains. And here's where I tell my story about how I suddenly found myself in a new career, one that I'd read about and knew from relatives. I had relatives who were railroaders, but did not experience until I went to conductor school. This is in McDonough, Georgia. This is Norfolk Southern's conductor school, and it's a classroom setting. It's almost like a small community college campus. Classrooms, simulator machines where it's almost like a video game where you learn to run a locomotive. And out back there's a little 4-track yard where they teach you how to get on and off equipment, how to couple cars, how to do all of the tasks that a conductor does. As well as they also have classes for signal people, maintenance and brake people, and car department people. So this looks like a ladder. This is, in fact, a simulated ladder on the side of a boxcar. But this is part of the school, and you cannot pass the school unless you pass this test. This is called the hang test, and you have to be able to put your feet in the stirrup at the bottom, put your hand around one of the rungs at the top, and with your other hand signal an imaginary locomotive engineer 10 cars away with your imaginary lantern. And then they watch you do that for a while, and they tell you, okay, change hands and go the other way, and then you have to do this, do this, and it's time. And if you can't do that for 2.5 minutes, you're done. You can pass all of the quizzes, you can pass all the tests with 100%, but if you can't demonstrate that you can hang on the side of a car, you're done. So that is the hang test. And you'd be surprised, people who you wouldn't think would have problems with this sometimes do. They give you more than one chance, but that's the final test. So finishing up at McDonough, I found myself back in Harrisburg, which is where I live, center of many Norfolk Southern operations, as a conductor. And here we are at Hershey, switching cocoa beans and sugar sweeteners and flavorings in and out of the chocolate plant. Now, you all know what a passenger conductor does. Goes through the train, keeps order, throws off drunk passengers, punches ticket or passenger, whichever is appropriate. But what does a freight train conductor do? Anybody have any ideas? What does a freight train conductor do?
Check freight. Check freight.
I didn't hear, I'm sorry.
Check freight.
Check freight, well, you check the paperwork that says what freight is on board. But when the train stops, your job begins. You get on the ground, you couple the cars. The engineer just runs the engine forward and back, forward and back, forward and back. And that might mean back and forth in the yard, or it might mean taking a train 200 miles to go to Pittsburgh. But the engineer only controls the locomotive. The conductor is the nominal boss of the train. The engine doesn't move until the conductor says move. But all the physical work, all the walking, if something goes wrong and the train comes to a stop, it's the conductor who gets down and walks back and tries to fix it, if he can, or she. There are many female conductors these days. So I did this for 8 years and then got promoted to engineer, did that for 4 years, and then I retired. And here's the area over time that I traveled on. All the red lines are former Pennsylvania Railroad lines. All the orange lines, the green lines are Reading, former Reading Railroad lines. Orange is Lehigh Valley, Jersey Central, and Erie lines. And the blue is former Southern Railway and Norfolk and Western lines. And all in all, about 900 miles of railroad. I wasn't qualified on all of it at the same time, but over those 12 years, I've traveled each one of those routes at some point. So let's climb up on the engine and see what it looks like inside. Here's the engine's, here's the control stand. Lots of levers, dials, and gauges, screens. The important thing is, you have to remember, anybody can make a train go.
Yeah, gotta stop it.
This makes it stop.
Oh, jeez.
It's like flying. Anybody can take off. It's landing that is the tricky part. And a different kind of control stand with analog gauges, and this was called a desktop setup where the levers go this way instead of this way. An older locomotive with even more plumbing on the outside of the control stand. And screens to monitor everything. Speed, air pressure in the brake system, all kinds of metrics that you have to keep an eye on. And so we looked at all of those screens and all of those dials and all those gauges, the horn, the bell, the whistle, sand. So lots of things for the engineer to keep an eye on. Here's the conductor's thing. Two things. Radio to talk to the dispatcher, and the conductor's emergency brake. The vertical lever there inside the silver outline. So there's Nelson Martin, one of my conductors on the train to Baltimore, ready to do the job. Now when you stop at the yard office, or when you sign up at the yard office to go on duty, sometimes they're very, oh, I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself here. This is the back wall of the locomotive cab. I'm going to show you several scenes here and see if you can see what is consistent between them. This is the electrical cabinet. It's part of the brake system. The door.
Duct tape.
Yeah, I started to say tape.
Another door.
Tape. Together. More tape.
What a duct tape.
So why does an engineer and conductor need duct tape?
Hold it together.
Cut out the wind.
Keep out the cold air. That's right. Locomotives are built by manufacturers, but as they run, they get jostled around, and fittings that were once tight are no longer tight. And in the winter, the wind comes in, the snow comes in, the ice comes in, and so you need a way to combat that. So every good railroader has a roll of duct tape. That's right. And of course, on longer runs, you have to take care of business.
Oh.
So there is a place to do that. And there are very helpful instructions on using this.
Thankful to be. Thankful to be.
In fact, many of your fellow railroaders will leave you many messages on the walls of the locomotive cab to tell you, to warn you or to encourage you. And here are some of them. The one on the upper left says, no warning, just shuts down.
Oh, no.
Up on
Bang
the right,
head here.
black beast,
Oh,
black bullet. And then down below, bang head here.
bang head here.
Helpful instructions to help you get through your day on the railroad. And there are other signs as well.
No pie. That's what it's like, no pie. I love that. That's perfect. That's
They started
perfect.
off,
It does look
they
like
started off with a
pie.
smoking sign, but some railroad artists decided to add this line right here to make a pie out of what was a
No pie.
burning cigarette, and then added instructions.
That is funny.
And speaking of pie, locomotives are heated on the inside by what's called a sidewall heater. It's an electric grid that is on the floor of the locomotive next to the wall on both sides of the cab. And so you turn it on to get heat to keep the temperature warm enough in winter, but you can also use it to cook on. And you can go online, and if you Google sidewall cooking, you'll find house heater.
We got them too.
So that's some of my pizza.
Whatever it takes, right? I know guys that cook.
So let's take a look at the kinds of things that are on a freight train. You know what's on a passenger train, people.
What
But on a freight train, it's many, many, many things. Coal, ethanol,
Ethanol,
crude oil,
crude oil.
stone, drywall, lumber, pipe. And this pipe is made right up the road here in Highspire at Durabond, right off of the highway at what used to be part of Bethlehem Steel. Rail, also made at Steel. Steel slabs. Shipping containers that come from the Pacific Rim on steamships and then come across the country on trains. Trailers. And of course, many common brand names that you're very familiar with. UPS trailers, FedEx. New automobiles get shipped by train. And they're in these covered carriers because they want them to arrive at their destination without broken windows and without graffiti.
Yeah,
And so, multi-level auto carriers, there's 3 decks inside of there, each
So
with
there's
5
3?
automobiles.
wow.
So when you get one of these trains, you're responsible for millions upon millions of dollars of cargo in one train. This can be 75 or 100 cars long. So you multiply that by 15 cars per car, that's a lot of money.
Wow, you're not kidding.
Now here's something that we don't see anymore, but looks like a passenger train, but it's a circus train. So we put one of the circus train
Barn, yeah.
about
my
6 years
God.
ago.
Barn and bed.
I was just thinking about
They
So
are.
you can see some of the performers
that.
sticking their heads out.
Yeah.
Giraffe heads.
Giraffe. Ringling Brothers, geez.
And then all of the equipment and the cages go in the rear of the train. But they stopped running the circus train a few years ago. John Deere tractors, plenty and plenty of these coming from Iowa, getting shipped overseas. The great majority of the tractors you see on
John
the
Deere.
trains
Yeah.
are destined for export. You walk up on these and see the papers that are associated with them. They're going to Kazakhstan, they're going to Australia, they're going to many places. And not just green, but also case tractors. Heavy equipment, transformers, heat exchangers. All kinds of heavy equipment. And military equipment as well. Now these are all high value bulk commodities. But there's one that no railroader is really excited to get, and that's the garbage train. And this is garbage that comes out of New York City, and it goes to someplace in Ohio to get burned and incinerated. It's fine as long as you don't have to stop and inspect it. Cabooses aren't too common anymore. They were once on the tail end of every freight train. Now they're used mostly for safety in local switching operations. This is the Hershey shifter, and it's used there because the train goes out to West Hershey, shifts the plant there, and then needs to go back to downtown Hershey where the yard office is. And it would be dangerous for the conductor to hang on the side of a car next to another main line where there are 50-mile-an-hour trains going on. So they keep a caboose just to provide it's called a shoving platform or a standing platform, a place for the conductor to ride safely. And this is what took the place of cabooses. It's called a thread flashing rear end device. It's a telemetry transmitter that sends up to the locomotive all of the metrics, the air pressure, the speed, And if you're on your locomotive and you're looking at the screen that says what your thread is saying, and if it says miles an hour 0 and you're going 60, you have a problem.
Whoa.
It means that the tail end of your train is somewhere back there and you're going on without it. Railroading it's a lifestyle. You can get called out to go to work any time of day or night, holidays, weekends. I spent more Thanksgivings on the railroad than I did at home when I worked for Norfolk Southern. So some of the conditions that you find: fog, snow.
Oh. Wow.
Sleet. Sleet was my least favorite weather condition to work in. I could deal with snow, I could deal with rain. But sleet, where it comes down and freezes on all the surfaces that you have to hang on to, that was not my favorite. But there are some striking visual things that happen. Rainbows, night scenes. This is dawn at Enola Yard. And we'll come back to Enola Yard up near Harrisburg for the end of our program. The sunrise over the Rockville Bridge, another landmark we'll look at in a little bit. And sunset. Now things usually go right on the railroad. Usually. But not always. This is down near Boiling Springs. This is a train that goes down into Virginia that I worked pretty regularly for a while. I was not on it the day this happened. A truck with a highway bridge beam, 100 feet long, came across the crossing, got stuck. Now this is with a state police escort, mind you.
Oh my God.
So they should know who to call when you have a problem. They did not call. The train came around the curve and kaboom.
Oh.
The crew was shaken up, but not seriously injured. But that was, on another day, that was the train that I was working. And it left quite a mess.
Oh.
Sometimes in the yard things happen.
Graffiti.
Cars get away and they roll into things they shouldn't roll into. Here's one of those auto carriers that went under something that it shouldn't have gone under.
Oh,
A little too low. And then sometimes there are engine fires, and they are very spectacular, and they leave a lot of scorching on the side of the engine, but they're usually not too dangerous.
Question,
Yeah,
that car problem, car carrier, is that a conductor issue?
it could be. If the conductor was, couple of scenarios, yeah. If the conductor has the paperwork that says there's one of these cars in the train, and the dispatcher routes the train on a track where there's a low overhead bridge, and the conductor doesn't catch it, then both he and the engineer are in trouble for not having said, hey, wait a minute. The dispatcher's in even more trouble for sending the train down that track. This can also happen in a yard where there's a low overhead bridge, and if the conductor's walking back and he's radioing to his engineer, okay, you're good back 10 cars, you're good back 5 cars, but there's an overhead bridge just 3 cars away, and it rams into it, then the conductor's at fault. The engineer's off the hook because he's just taking direction. But yes, that could be a conductor problem. More likely a dispatcher issue. My uncle was lived in Marysville, worked out of Enola Yard for many years. Told me the story of one of these in Harrisburg Station that they were switching, and some of the tracks in Harrisburg Station are deep enough to go under the overhead passenger bridge, and some are not. Well, somebody got their wires crossed, And they had one of these cars and they were switching, and it went under the passenger bridge, sheared off the tops of 5 new Cadillacs. Things like this do happen. Like I said, things usually go right, but not always. Okay, let's take a look at some railroad landmarks in Pennsylvania, some stations. This is Greensburg Station out in western Pennsylvania. Now a restaurant. Many train stations have gotten repurposed for other uses, libraries, police stations, historical societies, museums. So this is one of the nicer railroad landmarks. Here we have Greater Tyrone Union Passenger Depot. A bus shelter. And I'm glad to say that Amtrak has stepped up to the plate and improved that. So now Tyrone passengers have this. Here's the Lewistown Station. The Pennsylvania Railroad Technical and Historical Society uses it for their archives. And there's a small waiting room for Amtrak passengers as well. Then closer to home, here's the Duncannon Station. It's now a cable TV office, but nicely restored. With the picnic bench out back, you can go and sit and watch trains there. Here's the Marysville Station. It's now an outfitter. If you want to go kayaking on the Susquehanna, you walk in there and they'll take care of you. And of course, in Pennsylvania, there are a couple of really big landmarks, one of which is Horseshoe Curve near Altoona.
Yeah.
And I got to work trains going around Horseshoe Curve a number of times. And I wasn't working this day, I was just out there for a visit. And nice visitor center.
Those car carriers, where were they coming from and going to?
The ones that I worked on came from Ohio and Michigan, and they went to Newark, New Jersey. And closer to home from Altoona is the Rockville Bridge over the Susquehanna up near Harrisburg. .48 arches going across about 3,600 feet, about 3/4 of a mile long. Longest stone arch masonry railroad bridge in the world. Now, 48 arches. Around Harrisburg, there is a saying that 48 arches represent one for each state, that before Alaska and Hawaii were added. However, this was built in 1902. In 1902, there were 45 states. So that's an urban myth. 3 states had yet to come into the Union. I think Utah, New Mexico, and
Oklahoma.
So, urban myth. And here's the Pennsylvania, the daily New York, Philly, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh train, Amtrak coming across the bridge. These are not drone shots, by the way. These are taken from the house of a friend of mine, Dan Rapak, who lives up on the mountain overlooking the Rockville Bridge. So from on board the train, here's the scene. And of course, sometimes the river freezes over. And if you really want to spend some time at Rockville Bridge, you need to go and stay at the Bridgeview Bed and Breakfast, which is right there. Keith Latimer is the proprietor. Took it over and turned it into a rail fan and general B&B, where you can sit in the sitting room or go out on the deck and watch the trains all day long. And you'll see probably 50 or 60 trains in the course of the day. Okay, so now let's visit Enola Yard. Opposite Harrisburg. It was for many years the big sorting place for taking freight cars between the east and the west, shuffling them up and sending them out in new configurations of trains. Back then, it was all steam locomotives in the diesel locomotive era. All the railroads have pretty much interchangeable locomotives, and so they can travel from one railroad to the other interchangeably. And so it's possible to see many other railroads' locomotives in Enola besides those at Norfolk Southern. Norfolk Southern is the owner, but they put together combinations of other locomotives, and so you can see quite a variety. Here's Union Pacific. Burlington Northern Santa Fe. Canadian National. Canadian Pacific. And this is a Norfolk Southern locomotive, but it's not your basic black engine. It is numbered 911 because it's an engine that's assigned to first responders training. And it goes around with a train of tank cars and classroom boxcars. And first responders in many communities come out for half a day and they get training in how to deal with railroad accidents when they happen. And there's some of the tank cars. There are different kinds of tank cars to give the firefighters, police, and ambulance people experience on the different kinds of cars they might encounter if there were an accident. Now, the locomotives that come, go ahead, you have a question?
Yeah, all the different locomotives, how about qualifications for the engineer? I know in airplanes, they're all different, you only do one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If an engineer is qualified on a Norfolk Southern engine, how does he know how to run a Canadian National engine? They're pretty much the same. Once you get past a couple of the little differences, you can pretty much figure all the handles, all the levers, all the screens, all the dials are pretty much in the same location because they're all built by the same manufacturer. What was Electromotive Division, now Progress Rail, is one. Another is General Electric. So they're kind of standard. Locomotives that come from Mexico have English and Spanish titles on all the controls. Locomotives that come from Canada, the CN and CP, have English and French titles on all the controls. So sometimes they forget to put the English on, and you kind of figure it out. But you hit this and it goes bonk, and you know you've hit the horn. So I mentioned GE, General Electric, has a big plan for making locomotives up in Erie. And one of their main lines of business is selling locomotives overseas. So to get from Erie to overseas, where do the engines go? They go to Baltimore, they go to Charleston for shipment on ocean-going vessels, and they come through Enola. And they often stop for a day or two while they get the paperwork sorted out, or maybe the ship hasn't arrived yet that they're going to go off on. And so we have the opportunity in Enola to see locomotives of many different continents, 6 continents of the 7. There are no railroads in Antarctica. So here we go. Indian Railways. PR does not stand for Pennsylvania Railroad. It stands for Pakistan Railways. So there's 2 from India. These are for Australia. These are for Angola. They're going to Africa. These are going to England, so Europe. And and Brazil, so that's South America. So Asia, Africa, Europe, North America, South America, Australia, and of course Norfolk Southern is North America. Yeah.
Why no carriages?
Why no?
Wheels?
Oh, the wheels are kept separately because they're different gauge. They can't run on American tracks. So there's another car farther back that has all the wheels on it. Yeah,
How do they get the train onto the ship?
big cranes. They pick up each locomotive and they set them down in the hold of the ship. Yeah. Now, something that most rail enthusiasts are very well aware of is that Norfolk Southern, about 12 years ago, took 20 new locomotives and painted them in the colors and the insignia of all the predecessor railroads that went into what is now Norfolk Southern.
Oh, that is so cool.
And so these are very popular with photographers. I have seen and photographed all 20. As an engineer, I got to run about 6 of them. So that's how we'll conclude our program. We'll come down here with a look at some of the heritage locomotives. This is the Wabash. Everybody's heard of the Wabash Cannonball. And that's my hand, so that's me running it.
Wow, cool.
This is the Monongahela Railway from southwestern Pennsylvania. A lot of coal comes out of there, going to Baltimore for export. And this is in Lemoyne. I'm running this train. It's coming back from Baltimore. The coal has been dumped into the ship, and this is going back to the mines in western Pennsylvania to be reloaded for another trip. This is Conrail. This is down near Perryville, Maryland. And yes, I'm running that one too. And this is in Palmyra. That's again my hand. Penn Central locomotive. Penn Central doesn't have a very good reputation because they went bankrupt. But the railroad painted this because a lot of employees, Norfolk Southern employees, were hired under Penn Central, and so they have an affinity for that as their home railroad. And of course, from this area, Reading. And it seems like around here, everybody's favorite is the Pennsylvania Railroad. So we'll finish with a couple of views of the Pennsylvania with the Tuscan red colors and the 5 gold stripes. I ran this once on a gravel train and didn't really get any good pictures of it because it was kind of an evening assignment. But every time I heard about this engine running, I would go out to try to get pictures of it, and I always thought, oh, it'd be great to get the Pennsylvania engine on some really important train, like a mail train or high priority express. No, that's the garbage train.
That's the garbage train. Oh.
And so we'll finish up with what is an appropriate pairing of Pennsylvania Railroad locomotive on Rockville Bridge. So Railroad Heritage exemplified. So that's it. Thank you very much.